It's Wednesday, March the 17th. Lake level's just under 918. It's actually come up almost 4 feet since fishing report last week. Water's colored up quite a bit. We had quite a bit of rain. Still got some more rain coming, looks like the next day or two. But along with the water level, the lake level coming up, water temperature come up quite a bit. Now I fished around Cape Fair today, and most of the water was 53 to 56 degrees. And the water's kind of muddy up here, but the further I went back into the creeks, the water did clean up. But I mean, springtime, it's kind of awesome. 55-degree water up in the bushes. So I had quite a bit of fun out there today with a spinnerbait. So I'm kind of going to go over actually what I was doing today. And I haven't fished down lake, you know, since the water's come up. But everything from Kimberling City down to the dam should be pretty stable. It'll be probably within a week or so we'll start getting some stained water up there. By no means muddy, but just a little off-colored. But a lot of the Alabama rig, jerkbait, Ned rig, swim bait should all be working real good up in that area in the clearer water. Now in the dirty water, today I found these fish had their nose up on the bank. You know, they're wanting to move. Like I say, water's 55 degrees. It's supposed to get cold again tonight. But, you know, they're headed to the bank. They're getting up there, getting ready to spawn in a few weeks. But a lot of times I'll let the watercolor dictate what kind of blades and what color I'm going to throw. But chartreuse and white's kind of hard to beat. Now, I've got a big thumper Colorado blade with a little red kicker Colorado up front. Now I like this bait. See the big blade, and I'm throwing a 1/2 ounce or 3/4. Sometimes I will go down to a 3/8. Here's a kind of the same bait, just a smaller version, except it's got Colorado Indiana blades, a little 3/8 ounce. But what this big blade does, it allows me to fish the bait real slow in shallow water. The big thumper blade, the bait won't fall as fast, and you can keep a real slow, steady retrieve and, you know, keep the bait just a few feet deep. Works really good for around the bushes. And when that water's as dirty like it is right now, the big blade gives off a lot of thump, help the fish find the bait. And I think that red just seems to kind of help in the springtime. Now, I also caught some fish today on a double willow, you know, painted blades. I think this is called a coleslaw skirt, and it worked real well too. Now, the willow blades, the bait will fall a little bit faster, therefore you got to reel the bait a little faster. It just depends how the fish are wanting the bait, and I actually caught some fish out of brush piles that were about 8 foot deep today, that this bait, you know, I could get down there a little bit quicker than spinnerbait with the big blades. Now, if I get down lake where the water starts to get a little clearer, but it's still got color, I'll go with a little bit more natural and probably twin willows. And, you know, if a guy doesn't want to carry a ton of spinnerbaits with him, what you can do is just change your blades out. You know, just get you a few 3/8 and 1/2 ounce spinnerbaits. And Boatworks has got probably one of the best selection of Hildebrandt blades over there. So you can just buy your blades, and it only takes a couple minutes to pop, you know, different blade on. So you don't have to buy a ton of different spinnerbaits or be retying all the time. Just get your handful of blades, kind of mix it up a little bit and see what works best for you. And also Boatworks is open on Saturdays now till 4 o'clock. But another thing I was throwing, you know, when the water gets up in the bushes like this, some days they'll bite a spinnerbait or a chatterbait, even a Senko. But another bait I like to throw is a jig. And I did flip a jig some, but it seemed like I could cover water a little faster today because they were biting that spinnerbait pretty good. I didn't have to slow down and throw the jig. But with the lake level like it is, we've got a bunch of buckbrush in the water, and I seem to do better today in the creeks, from about halfway back to the very backs. And you'll know when you get into the back of the right creek, mainly what I was doing today was fishing runoff. Fishing areas where the recent rains were running into the backs of the pockets or the backs of the creeks. And what I meant by the right one is you'll see a bunch of little bait flickering, and I caught a lot of fish back in there. You know, I had to go weed through some smaller ones. The bigger ones seemed like they weren't in the very back, but they were close. A lot of the smaller ones I caught were about as far back in there as you could go, where it was 3-4 feet deep. But what I'll do a lot of times is I'll throw a 5-fish lures ultimate finesse jig and a cover jig. Now when I'm fishing that heavy buckbrush, I actually prefer the cover jig. Both jigs will come through the brush real well, but on the finesse jig, our weed guard is a little bit softer, so when you're fishing that thicker buckbrush, a lot of times when you're pulling over branches, the weed guard will give just enough where it'll get you stuck on a branch. You know, we've designed this one for a little bit of rock and brush. And this one, the reason we call it heavy cover jig, was designed for that real thick stuff. It's got a stiffer weed guard, a little bit bigger hook. A couple different ways you can fish it. You know, I mean, you can flip them in there, let it go to the bottom of the bush. What I was doing today, where they were biting a spinnerbait, I was just swimming the bait. I just cast it back in there up on the bank, and just get the bait a foot or two below the surface and working it through the top of some of the brush in the laydowns. And, you know, I'll kind of mix up the colors. A couple areas, where water was real dirty, black and blue. Even in clear water, black and blue is always a good choice. This one here, I was throwing Missouri craw. It's got a little bit of chartreuse in it as well. But like I say, with the water temperature like it is, I know it's going to get colder tonight, probably the next couple nights. So it may slow that spinnerbait deal, down for me a little bit, because that dirtier muddy water is probably going to cool down pretty quick tonight. But the main lake will be pretty stable. So, down there throwing a jerkbait, like we've been talking about for the past few weeks, and also wiggle warts just outside the bushes, a rock crawler. And I like to throw red a lot of times this year, and I know I've talked about that a lot, but a color that's been really hot is this Stone Cold, which I mentioned they're really hard to find, but I was down at Extreme Outdoors the other day, and he had a whole bunch of them down there. So he's one of the few places around that I know that's got them in stock. But it's a really good bait too. And even with the water up, you can stay just along the edge of the bushes with this. And I key on a lot of, secondary points. Try to look for the spawning coves, because these fish are going to be staging just outside of the spawning pockets. And if you get down there in the clearer water, the little, like a 2.8 Kitech or even an underspin, and you shouldn't have to get out as deep as we had been the past few weeks. Should be able to set the boat in 20, 25 foot of water. And what you're going to have to figure out is if the fish are suspended that day, where you drop it down 6 or 8 feet and slow roll it back, or we call it kind of scratching the bottom. Let the bait go down the bottom and just keep it in contact with the bottom on the way back to the boat. A lot of the points that usually work real good are the flatter gravel points, especially if it's got a deeper channel on it. But really looking for the fishing to be really good the next couple weeks. And especially as long as we don't get too awful much rain, the lake gets real crazy. Right now, it's stabilized. It hasn't come up in the last 12 hours, maybe an inch or so. So if we don't get a ton more rain, we're going to have stained water. And as these fish start to move up shallower, just going to be so many more different baits, that we can use to catch them. Should be a little bit easier to catch. Another bait's going to come into play is a Senko. Pitched around a lot of the buckbrush and the shallower cover. But the fish are definitely on the move, headed shallow. So as long as this water temperature, will stay up, it doesn't get too cold at night, next few weeks ought to be really good. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.